Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Public Works and Gain Reduction Committee. I'm Councilmember Joe Buscaino, Chair. I'm joined by Mr. Curran Price. Councilmember Price, thank you for joining us. Hope you all had a great, blessed weekend. We don't have a quorum, so I don't have to take public comment, but I know you all made your way down. So let's just knock out general public comment. These are, you can speak on items not on the agenda. And I'd like to welcome Rudy Espinoza, followed by Rosa Miranda, followed by Isabel Rodriguez. If you can all three come up. Rudy, how are you?
I'm doing well, sir. Good afternoon. Happy Monday, everybody. My name is Rudy Espinoza. I'm the Executive Director of Learn, a nonprofit community development organization based in Boyle Heights. I wanted to come to the committee today to support you guys and remind you that many organizations across the city have been working to create a permit system for sidewalk vendors for 4 years. This Thursday is a one-year anniversary of the motion being moved from the Economic Development Committee, and we have seen very little progress on this issue. So I just wanted to come and just take some time to remind you of the issue and also encourage you to schedule a hearing on that matter soon. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rudy. That's definitely on our radar for the record. Trying to find some compromise, and we hope to get there soon. Thank you, Rudy.
Sí, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Rosa Miranda. Soy
Now we
organizadora.
have someone to translate for us. Thank you. Oh, you're going to translate. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Mi nombre es Rosa Miranda. Soy organizadora con ILAC y soy, más que nada, estoy representando aquí a los vendedores.
She currently works with ELAC, and she is here looking to as a representation for the street vendors.
Esta tarde estoy haciéndole un llamado a todos ustedes que tomen liderazgo y que queremos que pongan atención en la necesidad, ya que ustedes tienen en sus manos la póliza de legalizar a los vendedores.
She is urging you to please take this subject into serious consideration and to please actualize and actually create something that can positively impact these street vendors.
Lo que percibido como organizadora que los vendedores ahorita en estos momentos están siendo criminalizados, están siendo multados y lo que queremos es su liderazgo de ustedes, ya que vienen fechas críticas para vendedores donde va a verse más seguido esta criminalización.
What she has taken notice of is that there has been a high increase in the criminalization of street vendors, and what she's urging you to do is to please take action in order to mitigate and to reduce the criminalization of street vendors. Also because there are important dates coming up.
Mientras ustedes, yo sé que en su casa podrán estar disfrutando de una cena de acción de gracias o una Navidad, mientras como vendedores están buscándose la vida en las calles y los recursos de la seguridad pública se están distrayendo para criminalizar a vendedores.
She's saying that while you are all enjoying a meal for Thanksgiving and enjoying your time during Christmas and these holidays, a lot of these street vendors are still trying to find a way to make a living for their families. And this criminalization and also the high policing of street vendors is making it very difficult for them to be able to do that with their families.
Agradezco mucho el liderazgo del concejal Price en poner atención en la situación de más de 50,000 vendedores, pero necesitamos de su liderazgo de ustedes. En especial, concejal, yo sé que usted tiene en sus manos, ¿verdad?, el poder y cada uno de ustedes queremos que ustedes contar de su buena vulnerabilidad para los vendedores, ya que lo único que quieren es salir adelante y trabajar.
And she wants to acknowledge Curran Price's efforts in currently supporting the 50,000 street vendors that are out there, but she's urging all of you to take note of it as well and to please use your power, I guess, to help with this movement.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we have another speaker. Is Isabel?
Yes.
Isabel Rodriguez?
Yes.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes.
Mi nombre es Isabel Rodríguez. Yo soy vendedor ambulante de Copar. Y pues Estoy aquí para pedir que nos ayuden, que nos apoyen, ya que está en sus manos poder hacerlo porque no somos delincuentes.
She is currently a street vendor in Echo Park, and she is here to encourage you to please help support the street vending campaign, as they are not criminals, they are simply people trying to make a living.
Yo soy madre soltera y es mi única fuente de trabajo. Me da tristeza que teniendo unos servidores públicos como ustedes, mejor prefieren darle importancia a la venta de marihuana en lugar yo vendo fruta fresca.
She'd like to encourage you to please, as public servants, please support the street vendors. Much like there is an important issue such as the sale of marijuana, she believes that perhaps it is still more important to consider street vendors. As a single mother, this is her only way of actually providing income for her families.
Yo lo único que les vengo a proponer que tomen en cuenta nuestra propuesta de vendedor ambulante. Me da tristeza que ustedes aprueben la venta de marihuana legalizando, siendo que nosotros nos persigue la policía, nos mueven, nos tratan como si fuéramos delincuentes.
And again, she wants to encourage you to please help them because it's quite unfair to see that the legalization of marijuana is taking place, and yet these street vendors are being criminalized and treated like criminals.
Volviendo a Eco Park, es un parque de tradiciones. Allá vemos muchas familias que nos mantenemos de eso. Y pues yo pienso que es mucho mejor vender fruta, hot dog, cosas que nos sirven a las familias de bajos recursos. Si nos ponemos a vender marihuana, imagínense nuestros niños adolescentes, ¿a qué van a parar? ¿Qué van a hacer de ellos?
As a street vendor at Echo Park, she and many others who also sell food there that's easily accessible to low-income families within the area, such as fruit and hot dogs, feels that it's really important for you to really take this into consideration.
Sure.
Because if she were to sell weed like it is legally now, she imagined the future of their children within that surrounding area.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And ma'am, give me your name, our translator.
Alejandra Garcia.
Alejandra, thank you so much for your assistance this afternoon. Thank you. Okay, so that ends our general public comment. So, Mr. Price, if I can direct your attention to the agenda, if we can take items 6, 7, 8, and 9 on consent, unless you want to pull any of these items. Okay, so hearing no objection, that'll be the order. We'll approve items 6, 7, 8, and 9 on consent. We do have 5 discussion items so that our presenters know. We'll take item 1 first, followed by items 2 and 3 together, and then item 4 and item 5. So, item number 1, Mr. Clerk, if you can read that into the record, please.
Good afternoon, John White, City Clerk. Item 1, motion Buscaino Rue, instructing the city engineer to report relative to the use of Envision, a point-based sustainability rating system and planning guide for introducing sustainability elements into Bureau of Engineering infrastructure projects and other city projects.
Thank you. So our Bureau of Engineering continues to be the global leader in innovation and sustainability, and I want to thank Mr. Gary Lee Moore, who is our city engineer, who's here today to present on Envision, which is essentially a sustainability rating system for infrastructure, and it's the equivalent, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the equivalent of LEED, right?
You're correct.
With a LEED certification for buildings, and I think it's appropriate that we hear your presentation today in light of our agenda items forthcoming on how to deal with the conflict between street trees and sidewalk repairs, the result of not considering sustainability in the early 20th century when LA experienced explosive population growth. So, Gary, I'd like to turn it over to you, but before you do, I just want to answer 2 questions in your presentation, if you can. And the first one is, will building sustainable infrastructure result in higher upfront or life cycle costs? And 2, how will this help improve the quality of life for our constituents that we serve in the city of Los Angeles? Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. Gary Lee Moore, city engineer, and I believe in our presentation we'll be able to answer both of those questions for
Fantastic, thank you.
And so, jumping into it, and thank you for framing what Envision is. It was started with the Institute for Sustainable Infrastructure and actually with Harvard, the Zophis Program for Sustainable Infrastructure. And it was funded, and three founding members, the American Public Works Association, the American Society of Civil Engineers, and the American Consulting Engineering Companies. So those three organizations got together to form this. They saw a real need. As you said, LEED is great for buildings, but there's nothing for infrastructure type projects. And it's so important when you look at an infrastructure project, how it can do multi-benefits and the community input and how we can reduce carbon footprint. So we're looking at all those factors, and we'll go into it a little bit more. We also looked at, that it really takes account of the triple bottom line, and it looks at the social, environmental, and economic impacts. And I think that's really important when you have such a variety of infrastructure projects, that it gives a way for the designers to look at these projects and to bring the best possible projects. And to walk through a little bit more, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Cirillo, our principal engineer, and I'll come back to close at the end here.
Thank you, welcome.
Thank you, good afternoon. Mike Cirillo, Bureau of Engineering. We're on slide 3, which shows the sinkhole on and some other pictures. As you can see, this is a representation of LA's aging infrastructure. It seems like all the time we're hearing of catastrophic events, collapses of sewers and water main breakages. And the fact that we're going to be dumping millions of dollars into the infrastructure in LA to try to improve it or replace it, we have an opportunity to implement Envision on these projects, to do our projects in a more sustainable fashion. The next slide you may have seen in some other presentations. This is a drought map of California, and the darker areas show the severe and extreme drought, and then the lighter areas are still dry as well. We continue to have a drought, and Envision will focus on, among other things, our dependency on potable water by implementing reclaimed water systems, recycled water systems. And so that's one component of Envision that we feel will be applicable to and have a positive impact on the drought. We all know that population is growing and resources are being depleted, especially here in LA. There's a housing shortage, the density continues to increase. We need to replace and continue to build new infrastructure. We need to be smarter about how we design by being less dependent on natural resources, because we know that one day the population will exceed the available resources, and that's really going to be an issue. So with Envision in mind, we can help offset some of that. Envision is a point-based system. There's 5 major categories: quality of life, leadership, resource allocation, natural world, and climate and risk. There's 60 credits in there, and it's a point system, as I mentioned. Based on the number of points you achieve on the project, you're awarded a certain level of verification, starting from bronze all the way up to platinum. And to the ENVSPs, or ENV specialists, are the ones that review the points on the projects and assess a rating. The Bureau has several ENVSPs already certified. You become certified by taking a class and an exam, and then you get your credential for Envision. Envision spans across all kinds of infrastructure projects, as you can see here, and many of these projects are projects you see right outside the window that we work on. It can handle a lot of various infrastructure projects. These are projects that we're going to need to do to sustain the population in LA. And again, we think it's applicable to be used on several of our infrastructure projects. So why is Envision good for BOE? Well, BOE does infrastructure, the city does infrastructure, that's what we do. Gary mentioned the triple bottom line about really meeting the social, economic, and environmental needs. It really helps us decide not only about doing the right thing when we do projects, but because Envision is utilized at the very start of a project in the conceptual phase, it actually helps shape the selected alternative for the project. So you can use it to guide your designers in the right direction to pick the right alternative. The next slide shows a few of the typical projects that we're considering to implement Envision on in the future here. We'd like to continue to evaluate Envision, and what we want to do also is look at what we're already doing as a Bureau from the sustainability aspect to see where we might be able to improve in sustainability. By looking at our current policies and our master specifications, and the Envision system will tell us some areas where we might be able to actually achieve higher points and improve some of our sustainability efforts. And we really need to learn how to design smarter. Okay, I'll turn it back over to Gary.
So one of the things here that we see is a partnership, and being on the ISI board since the beginning of 2016. One of my fellow board members is the Director of Public Works, Gail Farber. I think it's a great opportunity for the City of Los Angeles and the County of Los Angeles to partner on projects that we do jointly do together. So we're planning with your support to use Envision. Additionally, we want to take the opportunity to reach out to our other departments, and we're here right in the city, reaching out to the Department of Water and Power, the airports, the Harbor Department, other who build infrastructure projects, and introduce them to Envision. We've had great conversations with Metro. Metro is piloting right now, considering using it on some of their new projects of using Envision. And so they just had a report come forward to their board on sustainability, and they are considering Envision also. So we see a real momentum here in Southern California. We're really leading out here on the West Coast by example. And we thank you. And then your questions about, does it add cost? We believe that it doesn't add cost, because whenever you can conserve natural resources, whenever you can come up with multi-benefits, when you can involve the community, you really are delivering a project that is actually going to be, overall, it's going to be less expensive by looking at sustainability components.
Understood. Thank you. So I see the partnership with the County of Los Angeles. Do we know if Envision is being implemented in other municipalities across the country?
Yes.
If so, has it been productive?
Yes. Just here in Southern California, our Port of Long Beach, the Port of Long Beach has it done, and then other municipalities across the country have also adopted Envision also. But we're really here, we're one of your second largest city in the U.S., so it's big for us to go ahead and support.
Appreciate the efforts. Definitely forward thinking, Gary. And lastly, and then I'll turn over to Mr. Price if he has questions. In order for the Bureau to implement Envision, will you be seeking increased staff levels to oversee the project?
No, we see this as part of our core mission to sustainability. So we're not going to be asking for additional resources. We feel like, once again, in order to ask for your support, it's got to be, as Mike said, from the beginning of the project all the ways through it.
Wonderful. And obviously this also falls in line with the mayor's
Plan LA.
Plan LA, I see that. And you're answering his call and our call. I really appreciate your commitment to sustainability. Mr. Price?
Thank you, gentlemen. This is an exciting development, and I think a chance for us to really create a more sustainable, as you said, sustainable environment. How is this information going to be conveyed to the professional community? Is it a requirement? Is it plus points if they do it or not do it? I mean, how do we roll the information out?
Yeah, on our major projects, if we don't design it with city staff, and if we were to use consultant, we would let them know in advance. There's across the nation, I think there's up to 20,000 plus environmental specialists, so there's not necessarily a shortage. The other thing that we're going to do is what we've done with LEAD is on our internet, we show how we got the points. And that's what we're going to do here with Envision. So people can see how did we get the points, where did we learn, so to be a very transparent so that other municipalities, one of the things we've talked about with LA County is going out and talking to the other 88 cities and kind of being a resource for the other cities, since they only may do one project and we may do 15 of them in a year. We want to be able to be a resource so that on our web, the public, everybody can see where we're seeing those points add up. And so we'll all learn together and share this information. We really want to be a leader and share the information with Southern California and with the other departments in the city.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I do have one card on this item. If I can please call up Joanne D'Antonio. Did you fill your card on item number 1? No, item 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so you want to speak on item 2, 3, and 4? I do have a question on this one since you called me, may I ask? Sure, come on up.
I'd like to know how Envision works with the community, how their system involves the community.
Okay, thank you.
So
normally we don't do Q&A, but go ahead.
So Envision has multiple credits and categories, as I mentioned, and a lot of the credits do require us to reach out to the community to receive feedback on the design. So we will be sharing the design with the community, incorporating comments we receive from the community, holding regular meetings with the community to review the project, as well as incorporating things such as bike lanes or bike racks, or reducing the need to take transportation and making it more accessible to the neighborhood. So things like that. There's an engagement with the community, and you receive points every time you engage the community.
Thank you. So, Ms. D'Antonio, you mentioned you want to speak on 2, 3, and 4. Just make sure you fill out the 2 additional cards for. Oh, you're already on here. Okay. Okay. So with that, we'll, without objection, Mr. Price, we'll approve item number 1. Thank you so much. We'll see it in council. Okay. Thank you for that presentation. So we'll take items 2 and 3 together. If you can read that into the record, I'd appreciate it.
Item 2, motion Krikorian and Buscaino directing the Bureau of Street Services, Urban Forestry Division, and the CAO to report relative to the implementation of the city's tree removal and replacement policies and the development of an urban forestry management plan to sustain and enhance the city's urban forest and tree canopy. Item 3 is a Bureau of Street Services report relative to sidewalk inspection, construction, and repair, and street tree planting, pruning, and removal policy.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So it's no question that much of the sidewalk damage has been caused by our tree roots. Trees are living infrastructure that start off small, grow larger as they mature into adults, and eventually die and need to be removed. We must, however, make smarter decisions in the future about what species of trees are planted in each location to ensure we have less conflict between trees and fixed infrastructure like curbs, gutters, and sidewalks. Mr. Ron Lorenzen from Bureau of Street Services is here to report on items 2 and 3 and close out his report with some general comments on developing a more global urban forestry master plan as called for by Mr. Krikorian's motion in item number 2. And I do know we have a number of comment cards here, speaker cards. So I'm going to have Mr. Lorenzen make his presentation, have to answer a few questions, then I'll turn it over to a number of you who are here to speak on items 2 and 3. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members, city staff, and those of you in the audience. As Councilman Buscaino has stated, I am Ron Lorenzen, Assistant Director of the Bureau of Street Services. The Bureau is here today to present to you our response to several of the items that were contained in the long list of item report backs that City Council requested from several departments in the city several months ago when we first initiated with the joint committees with Budget and Finance and with your committee, Councilman, to push this sidewalk repair program forward. The Bureau, as with the Bureau of Engineering, basically the two of us are working together to make this program happen, and I am here to report separately on those items that specifically deal with tree issues, really, in the approximately 39 report backs that were in the request from Council. Those includes item number 5, 14, 21, 28, and 35 from the Joint Committee, and I will try to be as quick as possible as I go through these because there are a lot of things to discuss. A little bit of background, you know that the sidewalk repair program has been long in coming here, that we have many, many miles of sidewalks that are damaged. As Councilman Buscaino has indicated, the largest contributor to off-grade sidewalks is most likely trees, and specifically street trees. If you don't know this, we have approximately 700,000 street trees in the street tree population, along on the 6,500 miles of streets in the city of Los Angeles. It was estimated some years back that there's approximately 4,500 miles of damaged sidewalks. To get to the items specifically, item number 5 requested that the Bureau come forth with a sidewalk inspection and certification program. Since the time of the report back request, the Bureau of Engineering and the Bureau of Street Services, along with many other city agencies, have broken this program up into 2 separate programs. One is the mobility impaired, that's directly from the Willits case, what we are calling the Access Request Program. The other half of that is what is now being called the rebate program. There is a small group of funds that will be repairing sidewalks around city facilities that the Bureau of Engineering will administer. That's strictly related to city facilities. It's about $500,000 worth of work. In the Access Request Program, the Bureau of Street Services will be performing all inspections of the trees regarding these projects. The Bureau of Engineering will still be working to develop the estimates for the actual sidewalk work, along with the Department on Disability, and those will be provided to the Bureau of Street Services in what we are calling packages that are already, as we speak, being performed. We started performing those back in July of this year, and we have many, many projects in that original list. As I stated, the Bureau of Street Services will be the inspector for the tree work on those projects, and they will also be doing the same thing on the rebate program. The rebate program is that program. When this report was written, we actually thought it might look a little bit different than it does now. The rebate program has been more substantiated, although it is not completely set in stone yet, as the necessary amendments to the municipal code still have not been finalized. But the rebate program will, in essence, be the property owners performing sidewalk repair in front of their home and receiving a rebate from the city. The Bureau of Engineering will be performing those sidewalk estimates, and the Bureau of Street Services will be performing any street tree inspections relative and necessary for the rebate program. So that's real quickly item number 5. Item number 14 was a third-party retention responsibility request. This request was asking that the Bureau look into the possibilities of having a third person take responsibility for a tree, and I will quickly give you a scenario that allows you to visualize what that is. If I am a property owner who has a tree in front of my home that's involved in the sidewalk program, whether it be the rebate program or the access request program, and the city determines that that tree needs to be removed in order to effect repairs to the sidewalk, and I agree with that as the homeowner, I agree, but the community or the neighborhood or some other entity would like to maintain that tree and keep it in that location, we were asked to look at the possibility of a third party taking over that responsibility. The Bureau opines that that is a question that really is a legal question that needs to be addressed, and so we are requesting that the City Attorney's Office actually answer that question sometime in the future. Item number 21 is the area that I'm really here to address more than anything. Item 21 deals with tree removal policies, root pruning policies, tree selection, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm sorry, Ron.
Yes, sir.
On 14, on the third-party tree retention, did you make an effort to reach out to City Attorney? I know you mentioned you're going to wait to hear back, or is there any dialogue, communication made between the 2 departments?
Good question. We have not made that reaching out yet, but we will.
Okay, fantastic.
The Bureau will do that.
Thank you.
We'll work with the General Counsel to reach out to the
Ron.
proper person in the City Attorney's Office. Obviously, the street tree population, as well as the urban forest in general, provides many, many environmental benefits, many just simply aesthetic benefits to the city of Los Angeles. It's maybe the most important part of the infrastructure in the city, as it's the only living part of the infrastructure, that being the street tree population. The citywide sidewalk repair program is obviously going to greatly impact the street tree population. As Councilman Buscaino has indicated, we firmly believe that the street tree population is largely responsible for much of the damage to the city sidewalks. So anything that's going to be repairing sidewalks is going to impact the street tree population in one way or another. So we've begun by determining if a tree is going to require removal, when it's determined that that will happen, we have developed tree removal criteria and alternatives to tree removal in either in tree preservation and tree retention. I typically use the term tree retention as opposed to preservation, and I will explain why. Tree retention is keeping the tree while having to perform something to the tree, for example, root pruning. Tree preservation would be an example of a place where we don't touch the tree, and I will get into ways where that can happen in a minute in the report. To begin with, every single tree that's going to be impacted by the sidewalk repair program will be evaluated by the Bureau's arborists, every single tree. We have made some determinations about how we will deal with the trees when we do that assessment. I will begin with trees that are either dying or in severe decline. If a tree is dead, 100% dead, or in severe decline, and I will define that as being a tree that has lost 50% or more of its canopy. If 50% or more of the canopy is in a dead condition, the Bureau is going to consider that tree not a viable candidate for either retention or preservation. In other words, it's in severe decline, and expending any type of funding to keep that tree would not be in the best interest of the street tree population or the city's sidewalk repair program. So trees in this program, upon assessment, that are determined to be either dead or either 50% more in decline will be removed in this program. We are going to use best management practices developed by the International Society of Arboriculture to perform an assessment on all those trees that don't fit that category. So for any tree that is 50% or more live canopy, or healthy for that matter, we are going to use a basic tree assessment form that's been developed by the International Society of Arboriculture. This form really quickly allows a professional to look at some various aspects and attributes of the tree being assessed to determine if in fact that tree is healthy, if it has problems like structural problems that may not have been evident by crown quality, et cetera, without getting into detail about the actual assessment form. If the tree assessment risk evaluation form comes back that a tree is a potential risk to the city in the sidewalk program, we will recommend that tree be removed. If the sidewalk program is going to impact that tree and the risk assessment shows that that tree could be a risk, then we are going to recommend removal for that tree. If in fact it doesn't, we will then look at other ways to retain or preserve that tree. So real quickly, we're going to do a very not a quick assessment, it's a very detailed analysis of each single tree to determine whether or not it's dead. If it's not dead, do the risk assessment. If the risk assessment shows that that tree is viable for ways to retain, then we will then use some of the methods that I will now put forth.
How long would that process take?
For an individual
Start to
tree?
finish, to make that determination.
As the program comes forward to us, right now we are actually looking at every single tree in the program. Every single tree in the sidewalk repair program is being inspected by supervisors from the Urban Forestry Division as funded by the program. So we have enough staff to be able to perform that for every single tree. If in the future years, if we ramp the program up, we may actually have to come back and ask for more people to do that. But at this point, we're very confident, certainly in this year, and most likely in the next year, that without increasing funding that we can use what has already been funded to perform this task.
The system is used, or do you have an iPad out there, or is it pretty
We don't have it, great question. We don't have it on the iPad yet,
Check boxes?
but we're going to be putting it onto tablets.
You are,
The Bureau actually does have tablets already. The Urban Forestry Division does have tablets, and so we will be integrating that as we go along here. That's not done yet. That's a great question.
Good.
But we don't need that to be done. We can do it on paper. The key and important part here is to do the assessment so we can make a determination about the tree. As I've stated, that trees that are candidates for retention, we will look at different ways to retain those. A real quick aside, the best management practices and professional research has shown the best trees to maintain and to retain and to preserve are young trees. Now I know that this can be somewhat but at odds with trying to maintain large old trees with big canopy. But best management in the profession prefers to see trees that are younger, young adult trees, vital trees being preserved because they have a better chance of withstanding any of those actions that you may take to leave them in place. That doesn't mean we're going to be taking out all old big trees. That's not what it means. This is just best management practices, which we will also take into account. Some of the alternatives to tree removal, what we will call basically tree retention methods. The first one, and one of the easiest to do, is to enlarge a tree well. Tree wells are those growing pits that you see typically on downtown city streets with full width and monolithic sidewalks, where tree wells, the old standard of which was a 4x4, the new standard of which is 4x6, are enlarged to a size that the tree cannot be impacted to such a degree that it needs to be removed while still repairing the sidewalk. That'll be one of the methods we use. Sidewalk ramping is another method. Sidewalk ramping actually has the sidewalk be reconstructed over the tree's root plate and then back down on the other side of the tree, back down to on grade again. This is not going to be one of those that's easy to use to comply with ADA run-out requirements and for cross-slope requirements. This is not something we will use very much, but on a tree that has a very, very high historical value or something along those lines, it's something that we may think about using. Sidewalk minimizing can also be performed. Sidewalk minimizing would be an area where a sidewalk is actually made less wide. We have to do that within the ADA requirements. ADA allows us to go less than 4 feet at one point and minimize the sidewalk width. But again, this is one of those applications that we would utilize very sparingly because we are really cognizant of the fact that we have to provide that 4+ feet for ADA accessibility. Root pruning is going to be the most common action that we take to retain street trees. For those of you in the room who don't know, we had a program that lasted from 1999 when the pilot was instituted. The program actually started in 2000 and lasted until 2008. The city root pruned thousands and thousands of trees in that program. The Bureau of Street Services was the administrator as well as the actual construction group for that program. The Bureau has a tremendous amount of experience with root pruning and what can and cannot be done. Root pruning will be by far and away the most widely utilized practice for leaving trees in place, for retaining trees. The thing that the Bureau has to do when we look at a tree about whether or not it can be root pruned is determine whether the tree can stand whatever the root pruning is going to be performed and still be vital in a health aspect and still be safe on a structural aspect so that we don't create risk to the city in the future. The International Society of Arboriculture Best Management Practices and research has shown that you should not root prune trees any closer than 3 to 5 times the diameter of the tree. And a real quick example of that, if you had a 10-inch tree, that would mean at the low end, 3 times, that's the closest you could get to the tree to root prune would be 3 feet. To put that in context, the average size parkway, not even tree wells, parkway in the city is 6 feet. So if we can't get any closer than 3 feet from the tree, that means we can't root prune because there's not room, even in a 6-foot parkway, to do that. Now, I've said that we have a lot of experience doing this. We do. The Bureau does have experience. We are going to be root pruning to retain trees. We have found that there are certain species that tolerate this very well. So I do not have that list contained in this report, but we will develop a list of trees that can be root pruned, that we will root prune. We have root pruned literally almost up to the trunk on many, many trees. And our experience, we've never done empirical studies, but anecdotally with what we've seen from the 2000 through 2008 sidewalk repair program, is that trees have taken the root pruning fairly well. What does happen though, when you root prune, is roots return and grow back. So, if we're going to have a large part of our trees being root pruned to retain them so we can leave them in place, we are going to have to look seriously at how we either continue that down the road in the future with some type of a maintenance cycle, or we understand that sometime in the future, and our general experience from the old program was 3 to 5 years we start experiencing problems with sidewalks again. Some trees as early as 3. Almost all of the large species trees we root pruned are now exhibiting and we're looking at some 10 and 12 years out from some of these trees, some type of sidewalk damage again. So in our city's warranty program, which is 20 years, in our new sidewalk program, we're going to have what they call fix and release. The city's going to perform the first repair, or the private property owner in the rebate program will perform that with a warranty for 20 years with a one-time fix by the city. If we're going to have a program like that, and we know that root pruning is most likely going to not make that window, we either have to understand that at some point we're going to have to take out that tree anyway in the future, or we have a cyclical maintenance program of root pruning. Now, I will tell you that no city has ever done this before. I've done quite a lot of internet searching and whatnot and so forth to try to determine this. No other city has anything near the scale that we have. We estimate that a 3 to 5 year program would be required to root prune again so that the sidewalk doesn't have to be repaired again. In other words, we want to root prune prior to the sidewalk becoming non-compliant. So we would want a program that's going to root prune before the sidewalk starts to move at all. That's what we're recommending. The Bureau is actually recommending that we develop some program like that. Now, obviously, we would have to make some decisions relative to how Willits would look at that and how we would work that in with funding sources. But if you want to retain trees, root pruning is going to be our #1 tool to do that.
Mr. Price has a question, Ron.
Yeah, just a quick
Go ahead,
question,
sir.
because I'm going to have to leave, unfortunately, and I've enjoyed the presentation thus far. But question, so what role does iTree play in this? It can't, iTree, is that a software that we're using or can use?
Oh, you're referring to iTree, which is a publicly available system.
Right.
The Bureau is not utilizing iTree at this point. All of our work that's going to be on these trees is going to be an individual assessment of each tree that's going to be impacted. So iTree is a tool to manage a population of trees as opposed to this. What I'm really addressing here today is a tree-by-tree assessment for the program. It's a great question, and we need to determine ways that we're going to be able to manage the entire, not just the street tree population, but the entire city's urban forest, which I will get to at the very end of this. It's a great question, though. But for this program, we're going to be doing individual assessments of every single tree that's impacted by the program. So that's a real quick rundown, as quick as I can be, about how we're going to try to retain trees. Oh, I'm sorry, the last one, sidewalk meandering or relocation. Tree preservation can only be accomplished by moving the sidewalk out of the way and not doing anything to the tree. Okay? So, but here's the issue.
Meandering onto the street?
No, the other way.
Onto
Sidewalk
private
meandering
residence or commercial
requires
residence, right.
a dedication of the adjacent private property, an additional dedication to the city to allow the city to relocate the sidewalk over
Onto private property.
onto what is now considered private property. It's still their property, but they would have to dedicate for public use more of that property so the sidewalk could be moved over. Mr. Jordan?
Yeah, no, when you're done, I was going to jump in. There's one case where we're trying this. It's came before the Board of Public Works.
Okay.
The property owner felt strongly about wanting to preserve the trees,
right,
and was willing to allow an additional dedication onto their property so that the sidewalk would meander onto their own property and then would go back into its original alignment at the other side of its property.
Let me know if that works out.
We're still in the process. In that particular case, it's a very good solution, and the property owner was willing to do it.
Yeah, I'd like to hear more on that.
And so
Mr. Price, thank you.
We'll let you know how that one works out.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you, Karen.
Okay. As Mr. Jordan has indicated, this can happen, and the city would have to make some changes in its policies to make it easier for this to happen. In our 2000 through 2008 program, we actually asked every single homeowner if they were willing to do that. And because of the policies that the city has, we actually couldn't get anybody to actually bite on that. So, but it's definitely, if you want to preserve the tree, and I'm using the word preserve on a very specific type of keeping the tree. So that would be the last way that we could actually do that. Now, the tree removal policies will remain the same as the Bureau and the Department of Public Works now have. Every single tree will be evaluated on those methods that I just described. Those have to be cleared with the CEQA documentation through the Urban Forestry Division or on 2 or less and on 3 or more with a public hearing in this boardroom by the the Board of Public Works. None of those will change. It is a 2-for-1 replacement policy for both the access request program and the rebate program. The access request program, both trees will be planted and watered, in other words, maintained by the city. On the rebate program, currently the property owner will be required to replace and maintain 1 tree when they take out 1 tree, and the city sometime in the future will be planting the other tree. Now, tree planting specifications, the tree itself, the standards will be using the same standards that the Bureau of Engineering and the Bureau of Street Services now maintains, and those are contained at the Bureau of Engineering website. We will be requiring the installation of root control barriers on new plantings. Root control barriers have been shown to potentially push into the future the need for sidewalk repair. Root barriers are not a end-all for solving all of the problems, but because of the fact they potentially could push off the time at which the sidewalk may be impacted into the future, we are going to be using those. But those are on new tree plantings, not on root prunings. Root prunings, it's very difficult to try to put in a root barrier, so we will not be doing that. Tree species selection. This area, for those of you who don't know, with the Mediterranean climate, almost any tree in the entire world can grow here. There's very few tree species that can't grow here. There's obviously tree species that are a lot more suitable for this area, but the list of trees that will grow here and thrive is a very, very, very long list. Typically, street tree selection is decided on what we call in the industry the right tree for the right place. That would be a tree that if it's in a 3-foot planting area is not going to grow to be 4 feet in diameter. A tree that is underneath power lines 30 feet above the ground is not going to grow to be 60 feet tall. So in other words, try to select the tree that's most appropriate for the actual living environment where the tree is going to be placed. That's the first way that we look at site selection. Second way that we may look at it is in the actual microclimate. There's different parts of the city that have climates that, in the valley we have freezing temperature. On the coastline we don't. There's some trees that could be planted on the coast that could not be planted, that should not be planted in the valley because of those factors. Obviously, we live in an area that has several native species. Not a long list of native species, but we have several native trees here. The most prominent of those are coast live oak, California sycamore, valley oak, and a few other species. There's a bay laurel that's in the foothills and things around the city. But as far as street trees go, the natives, because they need a little bit more room, you need more room for those. The selection of natives, the Bureau loves native trees, and we'll put those in wherever we can, but because of their space that they typically need and they don't like to be around other things, that's something that has to be on a case-by-case basis. One of the things that people don't know about trees typically is that trees, although they produce oxygen, also because of their biological processes, create volatile organic compounds. It's called the biogenic emissions. The AQMD has a list of high emitters of these volatile organic compounds. And actually, when they fund a grant, we can't use those trees. Some of the trees on that list are natives, our own natives, that emit these high VOCs. So that's just another thing we have to look at when we're actually just deciding the actual tree species. Lastly, but certainly not least, is the community involvement. Working with the community, with what's out there, and if it's not, oh, I'm sorry, forgot to mention one thing. If a block has trees that are appropriate for that block, and we take out a tree, we will most likely replant a tree to keep continuity on that block, if it's appropriate. If it's not, or it's a mixed block, we'll then meet with the community to come up with a species that the community is happy with, and that we, as the Bureau and the determiner of these trees, think is the best choice for those locations. Now, the actual location of tree replacements in the sidewalk program. Obviously, if a tree can be replaced at the location where it was removed, that's where the trees are going to go. So if there's room to plant however many trees were removed at that location, then we're going to replant at that location. If there is not, we'll expand the location search out to the immediate area and the neighborhood. And if that still does not fulfill the amount of new tree locations that we need, we can use different methods. We could look at scientific heat island effect maps. We can look at low areas of canopy in the city, and we can also look at air quality data. Lastly, about street tree selection, the street tree selection guide has 150 trees in it. It's been a long time since it was revised. The Bureau, I wrote in here that we will be revising it by January. Probably won't be in January, but by at the beginning of next year, in the first couple of months, we will have those revisions made. And we will work with groups like the Community Forest Advisory Committee, tree people, et cetera, to come up with a list that's more viable to today's world. Item number 28, alternative sidewalk material. The Bureau of Engineering is actually the group responsible for determining sidewalk material. The Bureau of Street Services has actually utilized alternative sidewalk materials. We have put down rubber sidewalks around the, drawing a total blank here. The cultural center. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a total blank. Huh? Yes, no, not on Very Street. Over by Disney. I'm drawing a total blank here, but it's all right. Right close to down here, we've actually put in rubber sidewalk. Santa Monica, the city of Santa Monica has done a tremendous amount of rubber sidewalk installation. We actually went out with several other departments in Council District 5 a few months back and looked at some of the installations in Santa Monica. The rubberized sidewalks do have problems. I'm not saying that it cannot be utilized, but they do have problems. They're actually going to a plastic combination now on these sidewalks. Pavers are another alternatives. Permeable concrete is another type of alternative. But here's the only point. The Bureau of Engineering needs to address which items are going to be approved for use. This is the only point I will make. It doesn't matter what we put down as a walking surface. It can be rubber, concrete, permeable concrete, pavers. If we leave a tree and we don't provide enough room that it won't impact whatever we have as a surface, we have to have a root maintenance program, or we will have to go back and do something. Whether it be remove the rubber and put down the rubber again, or redo the pavers, we'll have to do something. So that's all I'll say about that item. Item number 31, diamond blade cutting. This is where you see off-grade conditions or lips in the sidewalk, where you've seen areas where machines have come out and they grind it down with a diamond blade cutting technique. Again, this technique is proprietary, the diamond blade cutting. The city does not perform that. On top of the fact, it's not been determined yet whether that's actually ADA compliant after it's done, because there are 2% cross slope requirements and other things like that that may not allow that to be done. So anyhow, there's really not a lot to say about that. Now lastly, the root pruning cycle. I've already indicated that the Bureau thinks that if we're going to be retaining trees by root pruning, which will be like far and away the largest method, that we have to fund and maintain a cycle of root pruning, whether that be 3 years or 5 years or 7 years, would be something that we'll have to determine as we see what happens with the trees as we go. So,
on the root pruning piece, Ron, do you
Yes, sir.
have any costs that have been developed in order to move forward on a root pruning program?
the initial root pruning will run if we determine approximately, say, a 30-foot linear foot root pruning, somewhere in the neighborhood. We called it out at $650 in the report, probably in the neighborhood of $400 to $600 to do that. Now, with the remedial, with the comeback repair, probably would be less, because you're not going to be grinding all those large roots. You're just going to be coming out there, basically redigging a trench before there's roots that have grown. So they're very small roots. We really don't know until we start that program how much that would cost.
Understood.
So on that note, I will go quickly to the motion by Councilman Krikorian. I think I've addressed most of that motion except for the urban forest sustainability part.
Before you move
Yes, sir.
forward on that, on the performing tree inspections, do you have adequate staff to move forward on that piece as part of the motion on the tree inspections?
We do. We are already doing it.
And how are your staffing levels today on that piece?
We were very accurate, I think, in our assessment of what we needed and what was funded.
Okay.
And as I stated earlier, I believe that certainly for this year and probably for next year, unless the program is ramped up, if they added another $20 million, it might add some to it, but I think we're okay for the time being.
Great. Just want to make sure we're being effective on that pace as well.
Now, Councilman Krikorian's motion actually in its last part alluded to a sustainable urban forest plan. The Bureau of Street Services, along with the Mayor's Office and several council offices, is in the process of developing and creating a sustainable plan for the City of Los Angeles. For the most part, though, the sustainable plan that we are writing as we speak deals with the street trees. To develop a sustainable urban forest plan for the City of Los Angeles is something that will probably require a significant amount of time to develop. Just so that everybody's aware, in 2006 we had a canopy assessment done by University of California, Davis, along with others, and they determined that there's approximately 10 million trees in the city's urban forest. 80% of those trees are on private property. So needless to say, any plan that we have as we move forward, it would behoove us to put forth a lot of effort to how we encourage planting of trees in those parts of the city on private property that don't have trees, because that's where there's space to do so. Many of our parks, believe it or not, are already planted out, and I would leave that for Recreation and Parks to address in a future time, but there's not that much space in parks. It would seem so, but I don't think that that's the case, that we actually could do a significant amount of planting. So with the street tree and the sustainability program for the street trees, it's going to be reaching, in the State of the Street Trees report that was published several months ago, basically lays out what needs to be done, not how we're going to do it, but what needs to be done. The sustainability plan will address how do we get it done? How do we get done what we addressed? And Jennifer Pope from the Mayor's Office here, we're working very closely with them to develop the sustainability plan that will address those issues that were contained in the street tree report. By the way, nobody else in the country has ever done anything like that, I don't think. So we're here. And another thing, along with our streets, with our State of the Street Trees report now, the Bureau and the department can be very proud of that. It will be difficult to address the urban forest as a whole. We can start it. We can do that. We can begin to make those, start asking the questions about how we were going to deal with this. I think that's the first thing that has to be done, is we need to develop those questions for where do we want to go with this? What would we really like to see? How does that look? And then start working on a plan. But this is a big plan and an ambitious plan. I would like to see us, before I retire, I would like to see the street tree thing done. To get that done and maybe start working forward on how...
Who said you're retiring?
I will be retiring.
All right.
But all kidding aside, what I think, this isn't my idea, this is an old idea, but the city needs to start thinking about having, we have a chief forester, but the chief forester is really only over the public works part. We don't have a person in this city that's over the entire global world. And there's many things. It's not just street trees, and tree people will tell you, and Andy Lipkus of Tree People preaches this all the time. We can't bifurcate and trifurcate these things into little pots because they all work together. So it's not just the trees. It's not just the stormwater problems. It's all of these problems together. So we need a group or a person that's in charge of this at the city. Most cities have this. We don't. It's because of scale. But I really would recommend that we look into that very, very hard in the near future about having a person or a group of people, a board of some type that looks at the entire urban forest, not just the little pieces, rec and park. So anyhow.
Appreciate the report, Mr.
No
Lorenzo.
problem.
Thank you so much for responding to the Joint Committee's recommendations and really appreciate your commitment. And I know you're on, I don't know what your timeline is on retirement. We're going to take advantage of your knowledge here as long as we can. Oh, God, who's counting, though? So with that, if I may now turn to our speaker cards. We do have a few neighborhood council members who are here and who have, their neighborhood councils have submitted a community impact statement, and I do want to give the neighborhood council members 5 minutes in compliance with our most recent city council, I don't want to call it an ordinance, but direction that allows neighborhood council leaders to speak beyond the allotted 2 minutes if indeed they do have a community impact statement that has been submitted. So with that, Barry Johnson, representing Studio City Neighborhood Council. Mr. Johnson, we'll give you 5 minutes, okay?
Okay.
If you want to use it all?
I don't think I'll need it all.
Thank you.
I did distribute today a small packet that included...
I'm sorry, can you hold this time? Barry, you also have item 3. You filled out a card for item 3. You want to
I can include that in this.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
We did a motion at the beginning of 2015 regarding street trees and particularly speaking to residential neighborhoods where houses were being torn down in favor of new houses. And oftentimes the blueprint for the new house included the driveway on the opposite side of the lot. Now, many times the opposite side of the lot, where on the Parkway, there was a street tree. So we found that developers were putting a driveway on the opposite side from where the driveway used to be and cutting down a mature street tree. So anyway, in this motion, we were just asking that when you go through and do new regulations, to ask that a developer take a mirror image of their blueprint and build the reverse so they can keep the driveway on the same side and not have to rip out a mature street tree. And we've had this, you may remember Councilman Krikorian's Cantura Street motion, which saved a bunch of mature sycamore trees in Studio City. And that was indeed was happening on that street. And he was able to do a motion covering the whole street just because they're all the same trees. But we've seen many other neighborhoods where these mature trees are being cut down just for the, because the developer decides to put the driveway on the opposite side. And we're saying, don't do that if a tree has to be cut down. And if you still want to do it, get a variance and get so many signatures from the neighborhood saying they agree. But we've found by practice that our neighbors do not want to see these street trees cut down. And I'll just move on to the other motion, number 3. I was just going to mention that our Urban Forestry Division on their website has an excellent thing called Street Tree Selection Guide, which I printed out and handed out. And it's got 150 different trees in it. And really, I think if we'd had this guide 60 years ago, we wouldn't have the problem we're having now. But one of the columns here is Parkway Width. The most important thing, and it has 3 to 4 foot parkway widths, 4 to 6, 6 to 8, and 8+. And it tells you what trees you should plant in a parkway that's, say, only 4 feet wide. And those trees are unlikely to break up your sidewalk 50 years later. And I know I planted a new tree in my parkway. I used this. I planted a ginkgo biloba tree, and it is well within my parkway width. And I previously had a tree there that would have broken up the sidewalk, but luckily it died before it could do that. But the tree I have now is never going to do that. So, thank you.
Mr. Johnson. Thank you so much. Rachel Malartich? Rachel here from Tree People? I butchered your last name, I believe. I should know better. They do it to me as well. Rachel?
Hello. I have some comments for item 2 and 3.
Yes, you want to take those both now?
Yes, that'd be great. So good afternoon. My name is Rachel Malarich. I'm the Director of Forestry for Tree People. We're a nonprofit organization concerned with urban canopy and climate resilience, particularly through community engagement, education, and empowerment. Considering our concern for the health of the urban forest and the benefits they provide to our communities, we're extremely encouraged by the vision set forth in the motion that was put forward by yourself and Councilmember Krikorian. We see here the beginning of a process that can lead to the development of what our city most fundamentally needs, which is a robust and all-encompassing urban forestry master plan. I want to reiterate what Mr. Lorenzen spoke to in terms of needing to include the appropriate city departments, not just the street tree folks at Urban Forestry Division, but also Rec and Parks and all the other agencies that touch trees. We look forward to participating in this process and look forward to seeing engagement also with our community members in moving forward that urban forest master plan that would hopefully look to provide funding for proactive maintenance, strong policy, and subsequent enforcement to protect our existing canopy whenever appropriate. In terms of item number 3, we've been obviously tracking the sidewalk repair program through this whole time. I just have to say we have to applaud the amount of expertise we have here in our Urban Forestry Division as seen in this report back. It's a complex issue dealing with street trees, and that department has done a tremendous job in explaining the complexities that face our street trees. That being said, we look forward to talking more about the issues laid out there, and I would really like to see the city look at, as we look at root pruning, as Mr. Lorenzen discussed, as one of the ways to retain trees, when we're looking at doing the replacement trees, and this isn't under Bureau of Street Services purview in my opinion, but looking at how we do urban planning to accommodate larger stature trees. So if we're removing these ficus and other trees that are uplifting our sidewalks and putting in very small trees in their place, we're never going to get the canopy back that we had covering our communities. And we need to think about urban planning that would allow us to put mature trees back that are going to be of substantial size. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. So again, let's call up Joanne D'Antonio for items 2 and 3.
Hi, I'm speaking as a citizen right now, but I am the chair of the Trees Committee of the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance. Sort of the elephant that we haven't discussed that I think will help our root problem is actually watering. And I realize we're in a drought, but tree watering is very different than lawn watering. And in places like Santa Monica, they have gator bags, which do slow drip watering periodically for trees. And this doesn't use a lot of water. This is very minimal water use, and it keeps the roots down. It actually keeps the roots down more than upper pruning. Upper pruning, I actually have been consulting experts who have told me that this upper pruning that we do around the crown actually creates the need for more water because it creates more dense growth in the tops of the trees. So I would suggest that as a plan that we do less tree trimming and only trim for cars and trucks at lower parts of the tree, but let the crown keep going up because that gives you height and it doesn't affect the roots coming up. And if you can keep the tree somewhat watered, and it doesn't take much. I mean, I have street trees on my street, and I put a hose out and just drip it for a few hours, like once a month. I'm still in tier 1 of water, but I water my street trees. And we need to get community involvement, not just the homeowner that is where those trees that are raising the sidewalk are, because a lot of times that homeowner doesn't really care about those trees because that homeowner doesn't see those trees. It's the person across the street that sees those trees. And so you need to involve the block. That's a good thing that Ron said. Involve the community before you, yeah. So that's my main point is that it has to be a community thing, and that court that we have before a tree gets taken, by that time it's usually too late.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your testimony. And Ryan Allen filled a card for item number 3. Ryan, come forward.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Ryan Allen. I'm the chair for the Community Forest Advisory Committee.
Thank you for your leadership on the CFAC. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We just wanted to emphasize that we're at a critical juncture with our trees in Los Angeles. With the ongoing drought having killed or severely stressed many of our trees, invasive pests and diseases coming in and further killing those stressed trees, and climate change disproportionately impacting our most disadvantaged and vulnerable communities. We're at a time when replacing our new trees is of vital importance for our city's future, so we can continue to have a healthy living environment. We need to make sure that a full environmental impact report is started for the sidewalk repair program so we can understand the impacts of what's going to happen with all these trees being removed. At a minimum, the 2-to-1 replacement ratio must continue, and that there needs to be city funding for the second tree and maintenance for 3 years. And that the Urban Forest Division has continued to be sufficiently funded not only to oversee the inspections but also to do early tree pruning and maintenance so that we can raise healthy and mature trees. And CFAC looks forward very much to working with street services and the other city departments and helping to educate the city and also our community members on this growing issue.
Thank you, Art. Thank you so much. Okay, that concludes our speaker cards. And before we move on to the next item, I do want to make a few recommendations on items 2 and 3, and they will be as follows. Amend a recommendation 4 to read, request the city attorney's report on the possibility of a third party accepting legal responsibility for sidewalk compliance if said party is requesting a tree remain in opposition to the property owner adjacent to the subject tree request for tree removal. Second, amend recommendation 8 to read, direct the city administrative officer and Bureau of Street Services to report back on the costs of establishing a proactive 3-year root pruning program. 3, amend recommendation 9 to read, direct the Bureau of Engineering with the assistance of the Department of Disability and the city's ADA coordinator to determine and report back on whether angle cutting and grinding is ADA compliant, and if so, authorize the use of these repair techniques for the incentive program. 4, amend recommendation 10 to read, direct the Bureau of Engineering and request the city attorney to develop and report back on an expedited and user-friendly public right-of-way dedication process, including any necessary ordinances to allow for the encroachment of meandering sidewalks onto private property. And finally, approve the Bureau of Street Services report as amended. So that will be the communication from the chair, so we don't have a quorum.
Sorry, just one more thing, excuse me. Ron Lorenzen again, Bureau of Street Services. I just would like to, for the record, to state in conversations I held with the city engineer that as far as the CEQA moving forward is concerned, that they have put out a request for proposals and they have received 5 requests for the CEQA issues.
Outstanding. Thank you, Ron. So we'll approve items 2 and 3 moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Okay, so with that, let's now move. We have 2 more items, so hang tight. Item number 4, please.
Item 4, CAO report pursuant to council action taken November 13th, 2015, relative to various city street tree issues and concerns and the authority of the Bureau of Street Lighting to trim trees that block street lights and create areas of darkness that attract criminal activity.
Thank you. So during the recession, the city drastically cut back funding for tree trimming, as we all know it, and numerous positions were eliminated or held vacant. Now, this led to greater scrutiny and interest by council members on numerous issues related to tree trimming, and numerous motions were submitted. So in order to address all of these various questions and suggestions in a comprehensive manner, I asked the CAO to write a comprehensive report on all of the motions that have been presented. I believe they even date back to, what, Dennis, 2008? So if I can have the CAO's report. How are you?
Good. Good afternoon, Stacy Sosa
Thank you,
with
Stacey,
the
for being
CAO.
here.
So the report before you is a response to your motion. Many of the issues specifically are related to issues surrounding tree pruning. One of the first things we looked at, or one of the major issues we looked at, was contract tree trimming versus city forces. During the recession, as you mentioned, the city reduced all of the staffing dedicated to proactive tree trimming within the Bureau of Street Services, and there were service impacts. We essentially eliminated that function for a period of time, and as funding became available, we began to restore funding, but it was primarily for tree pruning to be done by contract. So one of the questions that's come up recently as we've sort of dedicated more resources to contract tree pruning is the issue of, is it less expensive to do it by contract or to use city forces? So we looked at this. What we did find when looking at 15-16 resources, it turns out that city forces continue to be more expensive than the service done by contractors. For 15-16, city forces are estimated to be about 18% or $1.2 million more expensive than contractors. So at this time, adding any additional staff to perform proactive tree pruning would not reduce the cost to the city for this service or allow us to increase the number of trees that are pruned per year. However, it's important to note that despite that, Council did for 16-17 actually restore one full crew and provide 6 months funding for a tree pruning crew for street services, and this is the first time we're having dedicated city staff to perform this service. It also required a significant amount of MICLA funding, almost $2 million for one-time vehicle and equipment acquisition. The recommendation that we have on this issue is that street services report back on the status of hiring the tree pruning crew and to report back on the level of productivity that they're able to attain during the current fiscal year, and this should be done before council considers adding more crews. So one of the next issue we looked at was the actual contracting process itself. In 2015-16, this is the first year that the Bureau implemented a multi-year contracting model by awarding one-year contracts with two one-year options to extend. This was a departure in their prior practice of bidding and awarding tree pruning grids on an annual basis. So given this new process, our recommendation is that the Bureau report back on the results of the most recent multi-year tree pruning bids, the bid and award process with the change, and to report back on what kind of prices and bids they received from the contractors. Additionally, one of the things that we've seen is that there has been a sporadic and significant increase in per tree average cost for tree pruning done by contractors, as high as 67% increase in 2013-14. Given the swing in prices, we had an additional recommendation that perhaps the Bureau establish a maximum allowable year-to-year cost increase for tree pruning tied to the Consumer Price Index in all future requests to bid, and this is in an effort to stabilize the annual price increases so that in a given year you might only have like a 3% increase versus something like a 67% increase that we saw in 13-14. We also looked at contractor performance and quality management. In the past, there have been concerns regarding the quality of tree pruning performed by contractors. What we did find is that existing contractors do include specifications for standards to be used by the contractors, such as the ISA tree pruning guidelines, which are widely recognized. We also require that there be a certified arborist at each work site. And our contracts do provide for disciplinary action in the event that contractors are found to be not complying with our tree pruning standards. And this includes suspension of work, non-payment for unacceptable work, and even cancellation of the contract. So the Bureau did report to us that contractors generally comply with the city standards, and the Bureau now has dedicated resources to monitor these contracts. They have staff that's provided in the budget. However, the Bureau does not currently track how often a contractor does not meet the city standards. Therefore, in order to improve this process, we recommend that the Bureau report back with a plan to implement metrics that more closely track and assess overall contractor performance, including how often a contractor does not meet performance standards. The next issue we looked at was tree trimming and street lighting. Specifically, the committee had requested a report back on the authority of and resources needed by street lighting to trim trees that block street lights and create areas of darkness that attract criminal activity. So annually, funding is provided through the Street Lighting Maintenance Assessment Fund to trim trees that block street lights, and it's typically about $1 million each year. And they also manage their own contract of about $25,000 to directly use for complaints or calls that they receive from the community for specific locations where a tree's blocking a street light. BSL did indicate that funding for this should probably be increased to $50,000 a year to better address their request volume. And our report recommends that we go ahead with the increase to the current tree trimming contract to the $50,000 amount. So the next issue that we had a recommendation on was the city's street tree policy. Recently, the Bureau prepared a state of the street trees report. In this report, they recommend a best management practice of tree pruning on a 5-year cycle. Currently, the 16-17 budget provides over $7 million in total funding for tree trimming, and this is about an 18-year tree trimming cycle, which is over 3 times the recommended best management practice. So I did want to note that a significant amount of additional resources would have to be identified if the city does choose to adopt that best management practice of 5 years. Dead tree removal is also an important component of proper tree management. Currently, when tree trimming is performed by contractors, dead trees are not removed within the grid. Therefore, we do recommend that street services adopt a tree maintenance policy that includes dead tree removal in the grids that are bid out to the contractors, so at least there's that option to remove the dead trees from those grids. And
Thank you, Ms.
if you have any
Sosa.
other questions, I'm
Really appreciate your presentation. Just want to dispo a number of these motions that have been presented from our current council members and previous council members. Want to really appreciate the comprehensive report. We do have a number of cards here, and if I may call up representing the Greater Valley Glen Neighborhood Council, Joanne D'Antonio, which will be allotted more time in her presentation since your neighborhood council submitted a community impact statement.
Right.
So, Ms. D'Antonio, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, our neighborhood council voted overwhelmingly to not support this work because, for various reasons, first off, there's just an awful lot of ugly pruning going on, and we really want to get to the bottom of it. We would rather not see pruning than have especially the liquid amber and ficus pruning is very strange and is creating ugly neighborhoods. And these trees, while especially the liquid ambers, lose their leaves in the winter, and that makes them look really strange. Summer pruning is a really bad policy, and we would like to recommend that you not prune in the summer because that's when the pests grab the trees and then they lead to dead trees. I've seen pruned trees become dead trees that were perfectly healthy before they were pruned. We also advocate that neighbors be told when trees on their block are going to be pruned so that they can be present. And I'm questioning the $56 per tree trimming allotment that I found evidence of, and I'm wondering, these guys get up on cherry pickers and they act like they're in a video game. I mean, they really don't have a sense of what they're doing, and some trees are pruned okay, depends on the species, but the liquid ambers just come out looking very strange. And it's very hard to intervene, but I think that the people that live on the blocks that have to look at these trees all the time need to be consulted. And so as a grassroots organization, the Neighborhood Council, we would like to not allow for any more tree trimming until we actually have involvement with it. And I mean, I had the head of urban forestry come out when the trees on my block were trimmed badly, and he said, yeah, they did a bad job. You know, and it was the city crew. It wasn't a contract crew. And they did it on a holiday weekend, and we were not notified. So we're really down on it. I mean, that's all I can say. And our council just, people that I would not be expecting to be against the spirit of the city are really upset about the tree trimming.
Thank you, ma'am. Barry Johnson, representing Studio City Neighborhood Council.
I can be brief on this. It's just one of the number one things we hear from our stakeholders is when are our trees going to be trimmed, our parkway trees. So we would welcome getting back like on a 5-year cycle would be wonderful, because as it is now, it's like 18, 20 years since they've been done. And actually when we get heavy winds now, because they haven't been pruned, they're so top heavy, branches are coming down everywhere, and the city has even more work to do with those branches that have been blowing off. So we welcome a new cycle. Thank you.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much, Barry. Rachel Mallarich. And she'll be followed by our last speaker on this item, Ryan Allen.
Hello, Rachel Mallarich, Tree People again. Tree People looks forward to spending ample time reviewing all the details of this report, and I'm actually very excited to see it. We've been waiting.
Yeah.
So we're very excited. Particularly, we're excited to see the recommendation around metrics for reviewing the contractors, as I've had experience not in the past couple months, but in the past several years of speaking with constituents who are unhappy with the pruning on their block done by contractors. And if such a plan is in place, we'll be able to speak with greater confidence to residents about how pruning is being addressed in their communities and whether or not contractors are being penalized for poor work. I'd also like to add that pruning cycles following those BMPs is very important, in particularly when you're trying to get people to sign permission to plant forms for new trees. If they have that experience of having a tree that wasn't pruned on a regular cycle, they don't usually want to sign for a new one in their community. That being said, I'll just add, we are very excited about having a 2-to-1 replacement ratio on the incentive program move forward. I was remiss in not mentioning that earlier. Thank you.
Thank you. Got our final speaker, Ryan Allen. Is Ryan still here? No, he left. Okay. So thank you for your testimony. I actually want to correct myself. I think the oldest of the motions dated back to 2012, not 2008. So we combine all of these motions from my colleagues. And I appreciate Stacey Sosa and the CAO's office for the comprehensive report. With that, I'll approve the CAO's report, and that'll be communication from the chair moving forward. And if you don't mind, since I'm a committee of one, I'm going to take a 1-minute recess. I'll be right back. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, ready? So warm it up. Warm it up, warm it up, warm it up. Check, check, check. Has to warm up again, maybe? All right, here we go. Thank you so much. Back to regular programming. Public Works and Gang Reduction Committee. We are on our final item, item number 5. And if Mr. Clerk, read that into the record, please.
Yes, sir. Motion, Englander Krikorian, instructing the Department of Public Works with the assistance of the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, the Departments of City Planning and Neighborhood Empowerment, the City Attorney, the CAO, and the CLA to report relative to helping community organizations undertake community improvement projects.
Fantastic. Thank you. I do want to recognize and thank my colleagues, Mr. Englander and Krikorian, for moving this forward. And the maker of the motion, Mr. Englander. Oftentimes we have benefited from a number of our community organizations, neighborhood councils, nonprofits that want to do everything they can to improve the quality of life with a number of community beautification projects and cleanups. And we always feel that if individuals and groups want to help beautify the neighborhoods, we as a city should do everything we can to help them and at the very least get out of the way. So we have a lot of great resources from our Department of Public Works and Office of Community Beautification. The problem is that we just don't do a good job of marketing those resources. So I want to recognize Simi Park and from Mr. Englander's office and Laura Hill from my office. It's great to see the collaboration with our LEDGE staff. They have a presentation, and I believe I want to amend the motion before us. So, Ms. Park, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Council Member, and we certainly do have a record of working well together. So thank you for the opportunity to bring this item to your committee's attention. I think many of us can attest to the power of volunteerism and the transformative powers it can have in our communities. In the 12th Council District, Northridge West Neighbor Council for 4 years have been conducting a weekly cleanup without fail. I remember they even conducted a cleanup during a Super Bowl, so that's dedication. We also do have Northridge South Neighbor Council who have been doing some amazing things over the last couple of years, including transforming a public space that was a former dumping ground and attracted crime and was a public nuisance, and they cleaned it up, worked with neighbors, worked with neighboring schools to transform it into a nice public space. And of course, none of these projects by these neighbor councils would have been possible without the help of our friends from the Office of Community Beautification. And Paul and his team really do know what they're doing and have been of tremendous help. But with simple projects like community cleanups and graffiti paintouts, they're really easy to do. Just contact OCB and they'll hook you up with their tools and then you're good to go. For projects that are a little more complicated, that involve permits, construction, putting anything in the public right away, it just takes time, mainly due to coordination. It takes time to get approvals and get this to this person, and sometimes the process just to get it started can be anywhere from 30 to 90 days, and we feel that we can do more to speed up the process. So the intent of our motion is really to identify ways we can improve the process and improve the ways information is presented and disseminated to the public regarding community beautification projects. And we want to make it essentially really easy for people who want to do a quick project, like a community cleanup, to contact OCB and execute it. And that works very well currently. For more complicated projects that require a little more time, energy, and complexity, what can we do to help these ideas come into fruition? And what can we develop in terms of a step-by-step toolkit that the public can easily access so that they can help themselves? And then finally, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, what is the city already doing, and what can we do to replicate that? And then I'll make one last point. I did say finally. But to take this one step further, and on the back end, as a city, because we are a data-driven city, what are we doing when these requests for community beautification projects are coming in? And when they're coming in through the city's 311 system or the city's department, what are we doing with that information? So essentially, if somebody is contacting us as a city and wants to donate their time, energy, and their friendship and want to do something with the community, how can we make sure that we walk this project forward, and how do we make it come into fruition? So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Laura?
Good afternoon. My name is Laura. I'm with the Office of Council, District 15. So after discussions with the Office of Community Beautification and the Board of Public Works, among others, we identified that the OCB website and 311 are the two areas which, if improved, could have a major impact on the efficiency and ideally the number of community-driven improvement projects coming in. The idea would be to remove any barriers to entry for individuals, nonprofits, business improvement districts, et cetera, who are interested in driving community improvement projects, particularly in the cases where they've already identified funding. And ensuring that if questions or roadblocks arise, there's easily accessible information to help push the project through completion. We would therefore like to suggest amending the motion submitted by Councilman Inklander's office, Council File 141624, with the following recommendations. One is to direct the Department of Public Works, with the assistance of Information Technology Agency ITA, to develop a proposal for improved online marketing of existing city resources and services available to assist community groups wishing to perform beautification projects, including a new user-friendly, robust, visually appealing web page. There is one that exists right now, and that the improvements would have to include removing dead links, which currently exist on the OCB site today. Also identify ways to increase SEO, search engine optimization with the new web page, develop a method of tracking web traffic before and after the launch of the new web page to help measure its success and identify any areas of improvement. We also direct the Department of Public Works and ITA to include in the proposal a comprehensive list of all possible community improvement projects, in addition to step-by-step instructions on how to complete each community improvement project from start to finish, including key city departments involved. And identify and recommend possible solutions to common roadblocks community groups encounter when seeking to undertake beautification projects. Point 2 is that we also direct ITA, with the assistance of the Department of Public Works, to report on existing department protocols for responding to 311 inquiries about community improvement projects, the number of calls and types of requests 311 has received over the past couple of years, and finally, recommendations for tracking the types of calls received and their outcomes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Simi, for your presentation. Again, I believe all of our council offices have key nonprofits that, and organizations, neighborhood councils that want to do everything they can to beautify their neighborhoods. I, for one, want to take this opportunity to recognize the LA Conservation Corps, Share Fest. They have their amazing day of service every May. The Beacon House, among others in my district. Clean San Pedro, Clean Wilmington. These are nonprofits that want to do everything they can to beautify our communities. So I believe, with the spirit of this motion will allow these types of community organizations, community-based organizations, and nonprofits and neighborhood councils to kind of fast track their permitting processes. So really appreciate the leadership from Mr. Englander, and thank you so much for your report. So with that, I'd like to amend the motion. Do I have to read that? I know you heard from Laura, but you incorporate that? Okay, fantastic. So with that, okay, we also have the direction on ITA on the 311. Okay, I want to make sure we included that piece as well and amend it that way. Did you catch that part?
In addition to the amendments of the speakers, you want to have one more instruction for 311 to include access to the revised webpage?
Yes.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll approve item 5 as amended.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I believe that is the last item.
It is.
And we are now adjourned. Thank you so much.